Hi folks, this is Jake. Hope you're okay. Today we're looking at Jesus and the Eyewitness Gospels. As Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, the Gospels as Eyewitness Testimony. Richard Bauckham, 2006, Erdman. And we're on page 6. He writes, this is the assumption that the traditions about Jesus, his acts and his words, passed through a long process of oral tradition in the early Christian communities. And the writers of the Gospels only at a later stage of this process. So, sorry, I couldn't read one of the words, and I think re-edited or... So, this is the assumption that the tradition, this is form criticism. He's on about form criticism. This is the assumption that traditions about Jesus, his acts, and his words passed through a long process of oral tradition in the early Christian communities. That the writers of the Gospels were at a later stage of this process. Page 6. I'll read that again because I got interrupted with the telephone. This is the assumption, form criticism, that the traditions about Jesus, his acts and his words passed through a long process of oral tradition in the early Christian communities. And re-edited, I'll put it in because I can't read my word there. I think it's edited. The writers of the Gospels only at a later stage of this process. Page 6. Page 7. If the form critics are right, the disciples must have been translated to heaven immediately after the resurrection. That's J. Bauckham, who quotes Vincent Taylor, and we'll come back to that in a minute. One of the things about historical Jesus studies is form criticism, and which was mainly this guy, Rudolf Bultmann was the main guy for this, and we may look at him at a later date, some of these essays and writings. But Rudolf Bultmann was influential in developing form criticism. And basically what form criticism said is that the Gospels are obviously late literature, which have been developed over a long period of time of historical development, due to anonymous communities who've taken the oral tradition of the disciples or whoever knew Jesus and changed that oral tradition, and it became a mishmash of myth and fact, and these communities produced the Gospels, which are just edited bits of this tradition. But the point here in page 7, where Bauckham quotes Vincent Taylor, if the form critics are right, the disciples must have been translated to heaven immediately after the resurrection. What Vincent Taylor humorously is saying there is, look, this anonymous editing of communities, that would mean that the disciples who lived in Jesus' time and the disciples after the next generation of disciples after them, there were specific people. Like we had the Apostle Paul, and then we had Timothy, we had Peter, and then we had Mark, etc. We had Paul and his friend Luke. In other words, there were key individual people who were custodians of the tradition of Jesus. And form criticism is basically saying that these individuals just must have disappeared. And what Bauckham is saying, no, wait a minute. No, the way oral tradition and the way eyewitness material is passed on, it's actually often passed on by key authoritative individuals who then pass it on to other key authoritative individuals, And this is diametrically opposed to the Bauckham project. And what that means is if that's the case, if that's how it happened, then it opens the door to saying, well, maybe if there were these keys in individuals and they existed and they were authoritative of the tradition of passing on the life of Jesus, then maybe there's actually more eyewitness material and less mythological development here than we've given the Gospels credit for. That's the beauty of what Bauckham and other scholars in this area are bringing to us, and it has direct relevance against the skeptics, the atheists, and the many mytherists and Jesus mythers out there who said Jesus is a myth. It completely demolishes a lot of skepticism and a lot of attacks on the Christian faith, because what it does is actually bring this theory of eyewitness material brings us closer to the historical Jesus and verifies more the Gospels, and we'll get into more of this.